we'll have structural unemployment for a while, but then jobs that we haven't even envisioned 5, 10 years ago, I think they're already being created, right? Like a prompt engineer for graphic design or something like that. Maybe they don't have to have as much hands-on artistic knowledge, but need to have linguistic and psychological knowledge more so, and logic in order to produce the requests from their customer.
Work is changing quickly, irreversibly, and often invisibly. I'm Chris Banshee, and this show is about understanding where it's headed and how we stay human in the process. Hello and welcome to Human Work After AI, the show where we explore the future of work, technology, and what it means to stay human in the age of AI. We're speaking with founders, technologists, and thinkers who are navigating the shift toward an AI-powered economy. Today's guest is Philip Odelfelt, co-founder and CEO of Datavations, a company transforming how suppliers and retailers make decisions in the home improvement industry. With a team of former hedge fund quants and e-commerce engineers, Datavations brings advanced market intelligence to manufacturers and retailers, helping them optimize price, assortment, and inventory with data-driven clarity. Philip, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I always like to start with my guest's background or origin story, if you will. What first got you into technology and led you into the hedge fund and e-commerce world?
Yeah, it's good. Good question. I came here from Sweden, went to college here in the US, and ended up sticking around in New York City after. I got lucky at a very young age. I found my passion, which was data. So about 10 years ago, I started diving in pretty deep into it. And yeah, it's been an awesome journey ever since. I didn't realize just how big this market would become and how relevant it would become. For me, it was more of an intellectual draw towards the market. Ultimately, what set me into working with this type of data was I worked at a series of consultant firms, startups, and things like that. And most recently, I worked for a technology company that did forecasting for a top line for the public equities market. And there I covered consumer stocks and also some industrial stocks. And I started noodling on various problems associated with a lack of visibility in supply chains and things like that. I developed a algorithm that worked really well at understanding what was happening in the industrial space. And I ended up diving in and talking to a lot of these Fortune 1000 companies, specifically in the building materials space. I'd covered these companies in the stock market, and it was always so interesting to me how big these companies were. Having been exposed to perhaps some of the most cutting edge people and technologies and quantitative research, which is on Wall Street, it was always interesting to me that there wasn't that much signal in this market to trade on. And when I dug into the industry, it became apparent that lack of information technology, frankly. So upon the realization from having looked at these companies a lot, that it's a massive market that's highly underserved, and it's a very complicated market. And that's partially why it is so underserved. It caused us to really dive in and lean into this market. Since then, we've partnered with a number of the most sophisticated, I'd say, like early adopters in transforming the way that they think about their workflows and becoming data driven in their workflows. And our wedge has been to work with manufacturers and we help them sell more into retailers and distributors and things like that with data driven insight.
So what kind of research did you need to do to find your way into this industry? How deep did you have to go to find an opportunity here?
Well, so the first thing I did was I used a lot of public data. So my background's in data science, and I tested the algorithm versus the stock market and the predictive nature of the data in itself, which is so strong that I knew that I was sitting on something special. I was actually offered a job at a hedge fund in my 20s that I turned down when I saw that they wanted to have ownership of the IP that I've been developing evenings and weekends. And then I knew I was sitting on something special, became obsessed with the concept of building like a large and defensible technology company. And from there set out to go really deep into a vertical as opposed to spreading ourselves wide. And in this vertical, which is massive, we've developed a lot of domain specific ETLs and data science logic into our big data platform. And it's been incremental, iterative, and yeah, we've definitely had a lot of success.
How long was the research phase before you felt like you had a solution that you could actually bring to some of the potential businesses in the market?
Yeah, I mean, look, I unlike a lot of other companies, I was doing kind of like a lot of R&D ahead of having the guts to start a technology company. Like I didn't set out to want to be a founder, read about the news, and say, "Hey, I want to be like that guy." For me, I fell in love with the problem set more so, and I was working on it a lot prior to committing full time, essentially. Then, by the time that I committed full time, I had a couple thousand rows of code written that was sufficient enough to score a proof of concept. And then, the floodgates started opening up because so many of these large, really sophisticated manufacturers on like supply chain and things like that, they were starving for analytical insight. And from there, I don't think the research phase is ever over when you do complex AI and database infrastructure. So we're still in research mode and
Mm.
constantly iterating on more and more problem sets. I think that's a big distinction between a vertical technology versus a horizontal technology. Vertical, you got to go deeper, deeper, deeper. There's so many use cases and opportunities for us to still discover with the underlying technology that we built.
So where are you at as a company? How long have you been at it? How long have you been, in the market actually providing software solutions to your customers?
Yeah, so I went full time on this end of 2020. So going on 5 years now or so, and we were about 47 datavators, as we call ourselves now. I was checking our all hands meeting the other day, uh, and yeah, things have moved pretty fast for us. We didn't raise that much money at first, and we managed to get like significant traction without significant funding. Which now that we went out to raise a Series A, gave us a lot of optionality in the market, and we just took in $17 million in a Series A. So this is the first real capital infusion we've ever had, and with that, we have a lot of really exciting things coming out of the company right now.
So talk a little bit about how you decided to approach the problem. What was the problem that as you understood it, and as you dug in, did it kind of shift or morph? Did you get a better understanding of really where the pain points were?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I would say the first, going into this market, I came to realize that a lot of these companies they've been around forever, right? So, like, I like to talk about companies like Sanko Band. It was founded in 1665, so that company is 100 years older than America. And that's like a typical DNA of a type of customer. I mean, truly one of these like hallmarks of industrial excellence over the past hundreds of years, right? But what we found when we dug in is like oftentimes that they lack, at least in their commercial orgs, which is what we focus on, access to clean and scalable information. That was problem number one. And problem number two is the ability to transform it into action. So they're really relying on a lot of antiquated ways to do some of the key information gathering for their workflows today, like what's the right product, figuring out what the price should be, or figuring out how many units of inventory should be sent out. So that's really what we solve for. We come in with a big database infrastructure and a proprietary data set that allows them to transform, have access to data for the first time, like big data on the market, and then transform it into action.
So how did you go about landing those first few clients of yours, first few customers? What was the sales motion? What did that look like?
Yeah, I'm trying to look back. Most of it was cold outreach on LinkedIn. It worked. One thing that we've always known is that there's a big appetite for what we have in market. That's just like even when it is more idea product market fit. It's like there's always champions willing to raise their hand and say, "Hey, I believe in this." Where we found more complexity is actually on like change management within these organizations, and also
Mm.
like getting the right resources rallied around really adopting this fairly advanced category defining technology. But like cold outreach has always been high conversion for us because these people, they're smart that we sell to, right? They know where their weaknesses are, and this is one of the weaknesses that they have, and that we're happy to be able to bridge that gap for them.
So have you run into resistance once you got in the door with some of these companies where, you know, older, members of the staff, people that have been around longer, used to doing it a certain way, were resistant to the change?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are different types of profiles, but generally speaking, we don't find too much resistance. It's just some people, I'd say, are more aware of what it takes to mobilize a technology. A lot of procurement efforts, as well as like onboarding efforts and collaboration efforts with customers, I would say their biggest problem is that they're under indexed on people in the org to actually use software. This industry is a little bit further behind than some other industries out there. And oftentimes you'll have like one person who's logging into a software that's supposed to be supporting 30 people with the information from that software. So there's a little bit of a disconnect on that front. So I would say the distinction is not as much about ambition or attitudes towards adoption of technology. It's actually really strong in this market. It's more of a laggard effect on the understanding of what it takes to adapt technology appropriately. And you get great companies like some of our best customers. They invest like $1.5 million of payroll on top of our system just to mobilize it, right? And then you have others where they're saying, look, I want more, like the end user, who's usually like a VP of sales or someone out in the field. They're saying, look, I want more, but my team is not equipped to get me what I need. And I just refuse to log into the software. That's not me. So we're trying to bridge that gap, and that's where actually Gen AI comes in for us partially, and then also just coming up with really prescriptive workflows and softwares that makes it extremely easy for more non-technical, more commercial-oriented end users to interact with the recommendations that our data science models produce.
Okay, well, that's a great segue into the AI topic. So talk a little bit about how you guys are utilizing the AI both for internal purposes as well as for the purpose of delivering solutions or results for your customers.
So internal purposes for us have been split into data cleaning, insight detection, and anomaly detection. So I can go through all three of these scenarios, starting with data cleaning. So we're primarily a quantitative company. So we work with a lot of numbers. You can think of us as more similar to like a fintech rather than some kind of like marketing agency or something like that. So language models themselves aren't great at dealing with numbers, is what we found thus far. It can't do advanced math yet. And I actually have a thesis that it won't be able to do that anytime soon because it's trained on the clear web, and there's not a lot of information about that on the clear web. But I might be wrong on that front. But so where we used it first, at least a language model, the first application of a language model was merely to clean metadata. So, I'm looking at this pen right here. Is this red or is it maroon? So standardization of color has been huge for us. And ultimately what that has led to is a product that we call Ontology, which is a concept that's been invented by other technology companies like Palantir and things like that. And ultimately what we built is a really good system for identifying similarities in building materials. So this red pen at Home Depot is the same red pen as over in Lowe's. And it's very similar to this brown pen because 3 out of 4 attributes are the same. So they should be compared in analytics. And ultimately, that's allowed us to create one clean source of truth of a lot of different disparate data sets. And we were able to do that before. What this did was it allowed us to cut our P&E expenses by 10%, which is product and engineering payroll. So we could hire less people and get more done. And then also offer a product to do that for our customers, because oftentimes our customers don't want to log into 20 different dashboards and things like that. And we provide them with a clean, centralized database that serves as a source of truth that harmonizes multiple data sets into one. And that we were able to do before because we deal with an incoming terabyte of data every day. We're truly a big data company. But this has allowed us to do it faster and better. So that's the first use case, is cleaning data, essentially.
And then the other 2 use cases?
Yeah, so another use case is more traditional forms of machine learning. So anomaly detection, for example, and that's the more quantitative application of AI. And that's been around for a little bit longer than the language model. I mean, if you consider NLP language models, then about the same. But that's been incredibly useful for us to build out our core quantitative IP.
Okay. So a lot of companies talk about data, but the struggle is to make it actionable, right? So how do you guys try to turn that complexity into clarity for decision makers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes down to deeply listening to customers. It comes down to being able to link their business problems with our unique quantitative abilities and our unique proprietary data that we sit on. And that actually brings me to the third point of where we're using AI. And we are using language models in order to produce what we call the housing quant, which is essentially a way to interact with data with a agent supporting you in how to conduct research, essentially, and how to deeply understand, where should my prices be, where should my products be, and in what locations, right? Now, it's in the early days of R&D, and we've made some really interesting discoveries. We started working on it about a year ago, but we started really investing in it after our most recent funding round, right? So we only have a few heads on this, but it's moving forward. And I think that our discoveries from about a year ago, still a lot of them hold true. And ultimately, if I had to summarize it, the state of the language model today for conducting insight and advanced analytics is the equivalent of a UI of sorts. So it's a different way to interact with pre-populated domain-specific data sets. So really, what am I saying? It's similar to like a Tableau. Like it's just a new way of talking to data. It does not sit on the capabilities yet of doing advanced transformations with domain specific knowledge, which makes sense because of what I said earlier, right? Like the language models are trained on the clear web, right? At least the open source ones, right? So it's whatever you can find on Stack Overflow, right? It's great at writing code, producing code, and things like that. It's what you can find on landing pages of websites in order to produce good marketing content, things like that. And, it's probably read a decent amount of publications associated with, how to conduct research and stuff like that. But if you ask it a very specific question, like what's the right color for a power tool and how do I articulate that specifically to Lowe's versus Home Depot versus Menards versus Ferguson versus Walmart, it doesn't get that, right? So really where the depth of R&D comes in order to enable a language model, from our perspective at least, is very similar to how to enable insights in general, which goes to your original question. And it comes down to discipline on preparing data in a way that allows a human or a language model to quickly understand what the purpose of the insight is. So we've been developing a very domain specific and we think proprietary way of doing so that enables both a human, an alerting system, a dashboard, or a language model with some tweaks on it, frankly, for the language model in particular, to provide very domain and industry specific recommendations on different layers of logic.
Okay. So do you see with the direction that AI is going, do you see us eventually moving away from the dashboard model of SaaS and into something that's much more conversational almost, or where the insights are delivered in a different way than just a dashboard with a bunch of different charts on it?
Oh, most definitely. No, I think that we're definitely having a revolution or evolution, at least, of SaaS versus data versus AI. Ultimately, I think the companies that do this well, it will all be baked into a new form of technology that we haven't seen before. Language models, which is a lot of the buzz about AI in this current market, they have limited applications, but they have great I think that, and by limited, I don't actually mean limited. I just think that it's a little bit less than what a lot of people are focused on right now. But I do think that if you deploy them strategically, there's a lot of ability to conduct automation that we hadn't done before. So I'll give you an example. I work in supply chain at a manufacturer, and I haven't had the ability to look at where I need to rebalance my inventories before. I would have to go and call around and a bunch of things like that. The first thing I need is a good system of record associated with that. The second thing I need is an advanced model in order to say, these are the ones that I should be sending out emails to say, look, hey, customer, you need this many more units, or hey, controller, you need to increase the order volume or decrease the order volume by this much, right? So in that stack, you have essentially a good system of records and like clean data. Then you have ETLs associated with transforming data into insight. Like there should be more inventory here, less inventory there. But then the opportunity with AI or language models now is also writing that email. So this person, we can essentially automate a part of their jobs, and then they serve more as like logic controllers where the algorithm isn't really certain. They approve or disapprove on certain pricing applications. It might be or inventory applications or applications and hey, this is the right product over that one, green versus yellow versus red. And this stuff, it's a deep pyramid of a lot of information that varies from person to person, category to category, things like that.
Yeah, it'd be a lot to build into an algorithm, but with AI, you can do it so much faster.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's what we're taking a bet on, right? Is that it's another tool in the tool set of enabling. We're focused on enterprises primarily, so enabling people to do more with less and do it faster and spend less time on the tasks that they don't want to be spending time on, and spend more time on thinking strategically and the parts of their job that they actually are uniquely positioned to do.
Now, you mentioned that the industry has a deep desire or hunger for data. Have you found that there's that hunger for AI as well? Are they asking for AI solutions? Do they something that they're demanding? And have you seen that perspective change in the last year or two?
Well, so I wouldn't say that our industry is especially hungry for AI, but I think all industries are right now, right? There's a mandate associated with deeper utilization of it. And I've seen some really good applications within our industry, specifically in like the assembly line. So more on the manufacturing side. We work more with the commercial teams. And it's been interesting, because they deal with a lot of like PDF data and things like that. So there has been a decent amount of impressive adoption within manufacturing in general. But ultimately, I think that our customers tend to be fairly pragmatic. So they won't invest in AI for the sake of investing in AI. They will invest in AI if it makes them money. To a certain degree, I love that about my industry. It's not as focused on being in the know or in the hype cycle of a new technology. It's more centered around utility, and there is clear utility for AI in this market, and we sit right in the center of being able to mobilize some of these really cutting edge technologies combined with the very domain specific technology that we sit on.
Where are you seeing, based on what you're building and what is being requested of you by your customers, where are you seeing that the human is going to need to remain in the loop right now? That the AI tools and the technology can't take the place of a human decision maker?
Well, I think that with any change, any significant change in supply chain and more traditional markets, it's gradual, right? So there's definitely more low-hanging fruit. I think that there's a possible world during our lifetimes where a lot of automation will take place, even in like sales-oriented roles, for example. But the way that business is conducted today between these large enterprises is that it's a very much a relationship based of transaction. So unlike a seller on Amazon, a seller into Home Depot, they need to go there, they need to know the merchant, they need to shake the hands, they need to really provide a relationship based case in addition to data, which we help with on why they should be purchasing more from my brand versus another brand. So I think that sales role will for a long time always be intact, as well as a lot of the rules supporting that sales role. But it's more about getting more efficient in the way that products are priced, placed, and procured in markets. So if you can envision yourself walking into Home Depot, right? In the Home Depot, I want you, now this is our mission, right? To have the right product at the right price at the right time always, right? And it should be easier for you to find and it should be a perfect match. Today, we estimate tens of billions of dollars of lost sales associated with that problem alone, right? Due to not having the right assortment for you when you walk into that store, due to not having the appropriate amount of inventory and there being stockouts, and due to it not being at a price point that makes sense for you as the consumer, the retailer, and the supplier and manufacturer of that good. All of that is possible, and there's a lot of dead weight due to the lack of understanding for what should be there. So, not necessarily replacing jobs, I think more so making people better at their jobs. And that's how we see it evolving because a lot of these people are bogged down with really manual tasks right now. I will say that there are companies like consultant firms that go out and like check prices in stores and things like that. I think that they'll probably be automated first. That's low hanging fruit, and they're our quasi competitors to a certain degree. And yeah, we're working on that. But if I think about the more executive roles within our organizations we work with today, I think that they're going to have to be intact for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
They'll just get better at what they do.
So you also mentioned that you've got 47 employees or 47 members of your team right now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I saw last time I checked.
So what percentage would you say that 100% of those team members use AI in some capacity during their workday?
75%, I think, was the number, the rough number. Use it recurringly, either to write better code or to write better copy, like marketing copy, things like that. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we've taken a lot of the efforts to adapt it in order to be more efficient internally as well. And yeah, the applications for those individuals, they are still limited to being able to influence in that around 20% of their workflows internally. But where it does influence, it makes a big difference. I think that the benchmark of the 10% of reduction in spend on P&E, like explicit roles we could take out of our hiring plan, it's a pretty impressive benchmark, but it's easier for a small new technology company like us to do things like that. My more pessimistic views often when it comes to creating rapid change and adoption in like larger enterprises.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen that impacting any of your clients or customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned before, I've seen some really good applications for manufacturers in like manufacturing facilities, conducting the appropriate decision making, a lot around like regulatory technology and hurdles to overcome. But then we've also seen, them benefit from our technology, right? So the ability to discover insight faster, for example, or the ability to actually have clean data when they look at it for the first time without like an extensive 7-month period of writing a bunch of SQL queries, right? That we can dramatically reduce the time it takes to put together a information technology for them.
And I think it's maybe somewhat undervalued that these AI tools and the efficiencies that you bring, tools like your what you guys provide, can free up not just employee time, but also can provide revenue and growth opportunities that can help build the business to be larger and bring on more employees so it can actually create jobs, right?
No, absolutely. I think that's my take on it, at least, is that we'll have structural unemployment for a while, but then jobs that we hadn't even envisioned 5, 10 years ago, I think they're already being created, right? Like a prompt engineer for graphic design or something like that, being able to spit out 10 to 20 times as much graphic design in a day versus before. And it requires a slightly different skill set, right? Maybe they don't have to have as much hands-on artistic knowledge, but need to have linguistic and psychological knowledge more so, and logic in order to produce the requests from their customer when it comes to, hey, I want my slide deck to look like this or my logo and things like that. And we very much see that in market today, right? That's a perfect
Mm,
application of a language model, for example, that's been trained on a ton of graphic design on everyone's website.
yeah. Do you see trust, transparency, or explainability being part of the competitive edge in analytics platforms like your own?
Most definitely. I mean, so the biggest thing that's allowed us to enter into this market is the trust and the accuracy of our data, right? And that was the first thing I did when I came into this market. I held us to a very high standard, similar to if we were selling this information to a quantitative hedge fund, right? So we're doing statistical testing, and we actually package that statistical testing we call backtesting, making sure that the recommendations we provide are accurate. We provide reports continuously in an automated fashion to our customer, so they know that they can trust in the signal before they go and make a drastic strategic shift based off of it. So there's very much a trust based market, very analytical, and there are high barriers to entry when it comes to them feeling comfortable in the utilization of a new technology. So I think that one holds very true for our market.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll let you out of here on this. What has you most optimistic about the future that we're heading into with AI, and what has you a little bit concerned or leery about it?
I think my most optimistic view is the reallocation of budgets to CIOs and CTOs within large enterprises. Shareholder sentiment is shifting towards, hey, everyone needs to invest in AI. If not, you're dead, which is great because that shifts budgets into the hands of general procurers of technology. And from there, the tech stack that they acquire and invest in, right, might have, 10% or 50%, I don't know what it is. It depends on the stack, right? Improvement from AI. The rest of it is just technology in general, right? More traditional or new cutting form or more advanced forms of technology other than like language models, right? It could be more traditional LLM, it could be good ETLs, it could be good software. So my most optimistic view is that shareholder sentiment is so focused on AI that a lot of budgets will shift in the favor of technology in general, which is really exciting.
And what has you concerned or a little bit nervous about the future we're heading towards?
Well, I think as a business owner and operator, where we have to have discipline is centered around the reality that there's going to be a lot of R&D required in order to enable at least language model enabled applications. I've seen numbers anywhere from 8 to 25% success rate in R&D projects related to AI right now, right? So if you're investing, you got to take a bet on 10 applications in order to get one to work. And you have to iterate and improve very quickly. And I think that it comes down to discipline while also not being left out in the race. And so I think that's what keeps me up at night.
Well, Philip, this has been a great conversation and very fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can our listeners find you, follow you, and learn more about Datavations?
You can go to datavations.ai or find me on LinkedIn, Philip Odelfelt. I'm the only Philip Odelfelt, so it won't be too hard to find. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Chris. This was really great.
Thank you. And to everyone tuning in, if you enjoyed this, please be sure to share, subscribe so that you can always catch the next episode, leave us a review, and as always, stay human. Thank you for listening to this episode of Human Work After AI. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast provider so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.